Welcome to Canada's podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Phil Bliss. Welcome to Canada's podcast. I'm a business visionary and I'm coming to you today from Toronto. At Canada's podcast, we talk to entrepreneurs who are making it happen across Canada. So today we're with Vanessa Larucci, who's a CPA and a CA. Vanessa is an authentic and energetic leader who's known for her passion for education and innovation, which she brings to her current role as CEO and co-owner of BrainPower. So Vanessa, welcome to Canada's podcast. Really nice to meet you. As I normally do, what I'm going to ask you in three to 5 minutes is tell us more about your entrepreneurial journey, why you started it, and where it is today, and maybe, without giving anything away, what its future might be, basically.
Sure. I'm not sure about that last one, but I can give it a shot. Sure. So, like most entrepreneurs, I didn't necessarily jump right into entrepreneurship as a young person out of school. I had a much more traditional path. I was a chartered accountant. I spent almost 2 decades at a large consulting firm and a large bank. So about as conservative and structured as you can get. I always did, though, have an itch to scratch as it related to building new things. So even within those jobs, I was the person that always wanted to put my hand up to start something new, try something different, maybe take a risk on a new division or geography or product. And, I realized I really liked the opportunity to set a vision and then a path to achieve that vision, and started exploring a few entrepreneurial opportunities, in the startup world at probably around 2015, 2016. And then opportunistically, one of my former clients from my M&A days approached me because the business we sold at the time, it was an apparel business. We had sold it in 2008. I was the advisor. The buyer had run into some troubles. So the original founding family wanted to reacquire the business, but wanted a turnaround CEO. And so I thought, this is a great way to actually finally just jump in. And so I left Bay Street and took on the sort of wild task of turning around an insolvent uniform company, which isn't, it wasn't tech, it wasn't, an exponential growth industry, but certainly over the 5 years that I was leading that turnaround, I learned a heck of a lot. I realized I really loved running a business, motivating people, all that good stuff. And so when that exit was complete in June, I knew right away that I wanted to find my next venture. And again, I mean, this is life. Perhaps I'm really lucky. I, through my personal network, was introduced to the Search Fund structure, which is a funding structure available to entrepreneurs interested in acquiring and running businesses, but also being meaningful co-owners. So I had a few conversations with Sage Capital, Glenn Silvestri, and he agreed to do a search and support me on an acquisition. To be honest, normally this type of process takes 1 or 2 years. And I have to say we were fairly fortunate because within 6 months we had sourced and negotiated and closed the acquisition of BrainPower enrichment programs, which, unlike my last acquisition, was in a sector that I was really excited about, that being education.
Okay.
So those are the brass tacks of the story.
No, you had financing in there and acquisition and things like that. And, I think everyone needs some kind of financing to start a company, whether it's self-funded, whether it's whatever. And you have a lot of knowledge in that area. I guess one of the things is, what would you say are the key elements for attracting and winning the confidence of investors?
That's a great question. I was really fascinated actually by my experience as the person raising the capital
Right.
versus the person advising the person raising the capital.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say, as an advisor, you certainly craft a story, you have a model, there's all those things you need to have done, right? A business case, a really sound vision of where is this business going and what are the unit economics and what's it all going to look like. And those are all the technical things. But I would say when you're dealing with private investors and they're writing a check, I found what they were most interested in is actually getting to know me. Who am I? What makes me tick? Am I going to be able to deal with the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur? Have I faced hardship? Am I going to be able to pick myself up when things go sideways? Those are the sort of qualitative questions that investors may not have asked directly, but certainly in our conversations, those were the things they were probing for. Are you actually going to be able to stand up and get this done, knowing it's going to be pretty hard?
So is it less about the pitch deck and more about the people?
I thought so. Yes. And that's a very different answer than I would have given as an advisor, right? Where I was, I would have thought it's all about the pitch deck and the story. And that's certainly table stakes. You need to have that. So if you don't have that, forget it.
Yeah.
But if you have that and you cannot connect with an investor and win their confidence, you're probably not going to be able to raise capital. And there's all kinds of things that play into winning an investor's confidence. It's not just the numbers in the story. It's about who you are. And, you get into a relationship with investors, you're in a relationship for 5-6 years. You actually want to like the people. You want to be able to have a coffee with them and have effective board meetings and generally know that it's a good human sitting across from you at the table because you're partners.
Yeah. So, you got kids.
I do, yeah.
What does a typical day look like for you? You're high power, running a business, co-owner of it. How do you maintain the kind of focus that you got to have that kind of focus to succeed, and also have fun in the business as well,
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, it's hard. And, my son is 15 now. And I have to be honest that this would have been much harder if he was back in his toddler days. He's fairly independent, but I would say I do try to make him part of the journey. And what I mean by that is the one thing about being a CEO and business owner is you do have flexibility in how and when you get your work done. And so it's not unusual for me to bring my son to work to help me with something. This summer, we did a lot of outdoor marketing activities and he was my right hand. And so I would say that my days are really long, especially given that Brain Power runs after school and weekend enrichment programs. There's really no off switch because I'm doing all the stuff you need to do to run the business during the day. And then all sorts of things happen, evenings and weekends, that need my attention. And so it is always on for sure. But I've tried to integrate him into that and take the approach that it's a really unique experience for a teenager to be part of the inner circle of this business. I certainly didn't have that kind of exposure or experience when I was a teenager. So,
as an entrepreneur, you've basically turned around one business and bought into and growing another business, which is a little
right.
You weren't the founder in each.
Right.
But that's a fairly common way into entrepreneurships, especially for someone that you said had a solid career beforehand.
Right.
And I mean, what's the most important items? Because you're on your second journey on this kind of thing. What's the most important items? I mean, what do you do when you go into these things and say, okay, I've got to do? You look and you say this. those top 3 or 4 things?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for someone like me in my shoes stepping into a founder or family-led business is you really don't know anything on day one. I might have all kinds of credentials and experience, but a business is a living, breathing organism. And I think the most important thing for a new CEO or new co-owner to do is really to observe and listen, to understand what is the magic of this business, what has made it successful, what makes the people tick. And I can share, in my first venture, which was manufacturing and retail, completely different employee profile than my current team, where folks are PhD academics. And so I probably couldn't get 2 more opposite groups of people to lead. Yeah. So really observing and understanding, because if I had taken the playbook from the bank and applied it to McCarthy Uniforms, I would have failed. And if I'd taken my playbook from McCarthy Uniforms and applied it at BrainPower, I would be failing right now. And so I generally take the approach to zip it and really observe, listen, win the confidence of the team for the first 4 to 6 months, and then make them part of the revisioning exercise to say, I think the first 6 months of a CEO transition is a little bit like flying a stunt plane. You got this transition, you're moving from this, family style of management, which is unique to a family's goals and preferences. It might not always be aligned with what a PE-backed growth business would do. So you have to change all that. And, you first have to make sure that the baton is passed and you can actually run with it, because there is a risk if you start running too fast on day 2, you could blow the whole thing up. And this happens all the time with I see it, when I worked in M&A, I just saw this all the time. My goodness. So I think that's a hard thing, because the type of person who wants to do a growth PE-backed CEO gig probably also isn't the most patient person, myself being one of them. And so it takes a lot of discipline to zip it and say, I'm going to watch to see how this plays out, because I really need to understand the process and what's going on here before I change it.
So, you had a really good career. I mean, I read through your LinkedIn and stuff like that. Had an excellent career. Are you like, are entrepreneurs, are we weird? Are we wired?
I think so. I do. Yeah. I often say, gosh, my life and my family's life would be so much easier. If I had stayed at PwC, and, I probably would have been a partner by now. I would have been 25 years in. I would have had a decent pension. Same thing with the bank. And I think that there's something about the intrinsic motivation of building a business and taking a risk that drives entrepreneurs, and that drive drowns out all other logical reasoning, because it is very high risk and it's hard. It's really hard. It's not. I was sharing a story with one of my friends who's thinking of doing a search, and last week on Thursday night, I was on a panel at the Rotman School, and I woke up to all these lovely emails about, wow, second time CEO, this is so inspirational. And then I went to work and no one had taken the garbage out. So there was like a mess all over the floor. There was, just a disaster. And I had to wash the floor, take out the garbage. And because it was a holiday in the building, I had to put the garbage in my car and drive the garbage to my house. And that was my morning. And so those are the highs and lows when you're running a mid-market business. And that's the reality. If you don't want to stand at a booth or take out the garbage, this isn't for you.
If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself maybe, 15 years ago?
Probably to trust my instinct a bit more, because if I trace back, I was almost going to start a business or almost going to join a startup so many times in my 20s and early 30s. And it was the advice of friends and family regarding, you spent so much time building your career, you make good money, don't be insane. And I took their advice, and it was good advice. And as a result, I have a decent safety net. So that's good. But the desire to do this didn't go away. And so I wish I had just trusted in myself a little more, because when I did finally take the leap and started spending a lot more time with entrepreneurs, you start realizing, well, I'm really investing in myself when I'm an entrepreneur, and taking a bet on myself, which I should be comfortable to do. So yeah, I would just have listened to myself a little more rather than all the voices around me.
Speaking of advice, mentors are so damn important in our lives. What's the best piece of advice that you've received? The kind of piece that you carry around with you. It's always there. You can somehow or other. At least I have 2 or 3 things that I have that are constants.
Yeah, I mean, one piece of advice regarding running a private business, I would say I've heard this from lots of entrepreneurs, not just one, is leave your ego at the door, for sure. And when you're the CEO of a smaller business, you're not the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. So you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and really communicate and connect with people on various different levels. That's so important. Business is all about people. So leave your ego at the door is for sure one that's important. And one that strangely many CEOs miss, especially coming from corporate, where you're coming from a world where there was, someone that picked out a piece of art for your office, and you had an assistant, and someone that gave you your schedule every day. Like, none of that exists in the world of small private businesses. So that's very, very important, I think. I think the other piece of advice I got from an entrepreneur many years ago just was this concept that, you're always going to be juggling many, many things as an entrepreneur, but know which of the balls you're juggling are glass and which are rubber, because the reality is you're going to drop some balls running a business. There's just too many things constantly going on. And if you focus on the rubber balls instead of the glass ones, obviously follow the metaphor. That's not a good outcome. Yeah. And so sometimes I say to myself, that's a rubber ball. My website, it needs a bit of updating in one of these sections that really no one looks at. That's a rubber ball. It shouldn't be on the first thing on my to-do list. The parent that emailed me this morning with a concern, that's a glass ball. If I upset her, she can withdraw. She can leave a bad Google review. She can tell all her friends. And so, that's what I'm going to focus on versus this other less important thing. And that skill, I don't know what that's called. It's a form of juggling, but you're constantly juggling and reprioritizing. So I had a to-do list for today, and I'd say 50% of it's already been resequenced based on just reprioritizing.
The song, isn't it? There's a rubber ball that keeps bouncing back to you. So
yeah.
You got me going there.
Yeah.
So you've lived the corporate life, and you're living the entrepreneurial life. What's the best thing about being an entrepreneur versus being a corporate person? Or are they the same, really? I don't mean that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is very personal. Yeah. So for me, people are driven by different things. I'm really motivated by the idea that I can set like a creative vision and target and go after it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not afraid of the hard work to get there. And I'm not afraid of, planting a flag in the ground that I want to hit a goal. And so that's very motivating for me. The ability to set my course. That's also very scary and not at all what corporate life is, because the definition of corporate life is you're literally following someone else's course. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's one of the differentiators of entrepreneurial life. But for me, that's very rewarding, mm-hmm. To be able to, I was working on my strategic plan on the weekend, I had my coffee and I was like, maybe I should take the business this way. Maybe I should take it that way. And I felt happy doing that. Whereas someone else that could cause them a lot of stress. I've certainly seen it in team members. There's people on my team that much prefer, here's where we're going, and here are the things you have to do, and I'll just measure you on these tasks versus blue sky. Where do you think we should go? That's a scary question for a lot of people.
What book are you reading now, or listening to, or what podcasts do you? Of course, you listen to Candace podcast.
Yes, this is a great podcast.
What podcasts do you? We all do read, listen to books, listen to podcasts. I mean, if you're that kind of person, that's what you do. What have you listened to, read recently that's impacted you?
Yeah, so I'm in a phase where, and I think this is, given where I'm at, and I'm 6 months into this venture, I would say NPR, How I Built This. It is a podcast where Guy Raz interviews entrepreneurs about their journey from startup to scale up. Mm-hmm. And I find that like a very comforting and rewarding podcast to listen to because A, I got lots of good advice, but B, you sort of, find comfort in knowing there's ups and downs. And none of these great businesses, I was just listening to the NPR podcast about SoulCycle and some of the ups and downs in that business, which had some parallels to my current business. It's a service business, big market, differentiating based on a premium experience. And listening to that, like I got so many good ideas, but I also just felt like, okay, it's supposed to go like this. There's supposed to be good days and bad days. So I love that podcast. I also love Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman. Same reason. I think it's because it's so relevant to where I'm at right now. And so those are two of my favorites. Mm-hmm. I am trying to read right now outside of business interests. And so because I'm running a business, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be?
Restless.
Restless?
Yeah.
That's a new one.
Oh gosh, I had to write an article for about brain power, and the reason I answered so quickly is I had to pick a word to describe myself, and I think I did pick restless, and I think that's part of the nature of people that are doing the kind of thing I'm doing right now. Yeah. I mean, I closed a great exit in June. I had nothing but a summer of sunshine to contemplate last June. And instead, I did this crazy thing again of going and raising capital and buying a scale up that was even smaller than my first business. So, the smaller the starting point, the messier the scaling process for sure. Even though that first business was insolvent and that had its own challenges, it had a little more scale. Like it had a team, it had a finance department. Like I'm sort of in the build mode right from the get-go on this one.
Okay. Are you a morning or a night person? I ask everybody that.
I'm sadly, for my current life, I'm a morning person. And so my business is a night business. So that's been interesting. That's made me a little tired, I'll admit.
Yeah.
And I'm just adjusting to how do I set boundaries and actually accept that I'm just never going to be fully functioning really late at night. So I need to have a team that compensates for that.
Yeah. What kind of job would you not like to do? Obviously, you enjoy it. But
the funny answer, seeing as I'm an accountant, but I really didn't like being an accountant. So I can say with great confidence that when I was an auditor, and gosh, this is the value of really exploring what you study in school, because I spent all this time and stress getting through the accounting exams and getting my designation. And anyone who's been through it can tell you, like, you really have to go through the ringer. And I started auditing. And I remember thinking, I really don't like this. Like, I hate it. It's monotonous. It's very detail oriented. It's rigid. And those are all the things that don't bring me any kind of joy at all.
What you mean, you're fairly new into this business. Mm-hmm. What are you most excited about in the business for over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so good question. I think this is the first time. I am so excited about the impact we create at Brainpower. We are connecting these amazing, brilliant faculty with high potential kids. And when you facilitate that connection, it's so fantastic to see the outcome. Like, these kids are just incredible. They just blow my mind. And being part of that and seeing that that is the outcome of my work is so rewarding. And not that other businesses I worked with weren't rewarding, but this one's particularly purpose driven. And so I think I've hit the balance of, doing work that I really love and I'm passionate about, and it's also a great business because it's a huge market. And gosh, there's so much demand. I mean, every child in the world could use more education, really, and that's a pretty darn big market.
It's I'm just looking. My 30 minutes is up.
Yeah.
So how can people get a hold of you if there's anything they want to talk to you about?
Sure. Well, it's easy. I'm at Brainpower Enrichment Programs. My email is Vanessa, VANESSA, @brainpower.ca. That's pretty easy. You can also check out our website, Brainpower, or brainpower.ca, or our Instagram handle, same name. And we have programs for kids ranging grade 1 to grade 12, and some pretty exciting summer and seasonal programs, in addition to our core annual programs. So for anyone listening that is looking for enrichment programming, visit us at Brainpower, or if you just want some advice. I'm also a fairly active mentor in the entrepreneurial community, not just to mentor other people, because I learn just as much from these conversations myself.
Vanessa, thanks again. It's been great meeting you.
Thank you. Fantastic meeting you.